Hello, this is Valerie Munro here, and we're going to take a break from the reading because I have the very great pleasure to be talking to our brand new Twickenham MP, Munira Wilson. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, now, you're almost halfway into the world of visual impairment because I know I shouldn't really start off by talking about your husband off the bat, but he was closely associated with RNIB.
He was. He worked there for 6 years, and he's still in contact with and friends with some people who work there. And he lobbied me very, very hard to make sure that I went to an event that RNIB were holding in Parliament this week, which was a drop-in event for all MPs to come and find out more about the world of blind and partially sighted people, the challenges of being able to do simple things like look at a piece of paper or, when you've got, say, a cataract or AMD or something like that. So they had some sort of goggles that you could look through and see what that looked like. But also to look at some of the technologies coming through that will support blind and partially sighted people. There was a guide dog there, and we were hearing about some of the challenges that people have accessing benefits and things.
At the end of last week's programme, I was saying I was going to meet you today, and did they have a specific question?
Okay.
And we have one question, which I think I'm going to ask you straight away.
Right. I hope it's not too difficult.
No, and I think it probably will reflect on what you just said. The question is, How will your role seek to influence the new government in its attitude to the lot of disabled people in the community?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges we have actually in influencing government at the moment is, of course, they've got an 80-seat majority, so trying to change much through legislation is quite a challenge. Nonetheless, I think our job as an opposition party is to very much scrutinise and hold them to account on everything they're bringing forward. So in terms of disabilities, for instance, I mean, one of the two briefs I've been given is transport. So I'm keen to keep pushing the issue of accessibility of transport, and whether that's getting on and off trains and buses, the lack of steps at stations, etc. A very live example at the moment is a brand new Twickenham station, and the lifts aren't operational the whole time, which I've been looking into over the last 24 hours, and I can give you the answer to that one if you'd like it. So there's been complaints that actually in the evenings after about 10 o'clock at night the lifts aren't operational, and that should be resolved from Monday. What happens is, in the 2 weeks following opening, they're in a testing phase, and because they can't be sure that they won't break down at some point, if there is no staff in the station, they're not allowed to operate the lifts in that 2-week phase. After the testing is complete, assuming everything's okay, and apparently, according to the developers, I was speaking to them yesterday, everything seems fine, they will hand them over to Network Rail over this weekend, and by Monday at the latest, they should be operational the whole time. So it's just this 2-week testing phase that we've got to get through.
Couldn't they tested it before they opened?
Well, you'd think. I don't quite know why it has to be this way. My other concern is there's been a total lack of communication about it. So I've had lots of complaints, as have local councillors via social media and other channels, because there's been no communication. There's no signs up at the station saying this is the way it's going to be for the first 2 weeks. We haven't been informed as elected representatives, and we're the first people that passengers come to complain. A bit better communication, even if they had to do it this way, which I agree is not ideal.
So how is somebody supposed to get off a train after the magic hour of, 10 o'clock?
Oh, well, apparently if you're a wheelchair user, then at the moment, after 10 o'clock, you can't use Twickenham Station. I mean, it's absurd, and it's wrong. And I can understand why people are so angry about it.
Now, part of your brief,
yes,
you've got a very wide brief. You've got transport, you've got health and well-being and social care. I mean, that's absolutely huge.
Yes. It's enormous, and unfortunately, the Liberal Democrats didn't perform as well as we had hoped at the general election. And being a smaller group in the House of Commons, and there are a number of portfolios to cover, we are doubling up on a number of them. So I've got health and social care, partly because of my background and working in health policy, and I was keen to do transport because of the concerns we have here in this constituency around Heathrow expansion, but also our terrible train service.
Well, apart from the terrible trains, Heathrow obviously has caused a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what's going on there?
So Richmond Council and a number of other neighbouring councils have been mounting a legal challenge on the proposals to expand Heathrow, and that verdict, I believe, is due towards the end of this month. So we await that. And then beyond that, there will be now a whole further consultation and then a formal planning process that Heathrow will be going through. And of course, I and various action groups against Heathrow and local councils and councillors and residents will continue to challenge right the way through that process to try and stop this happening. And I've been trying to press for a further vote in Parliament. We had a debate on transport on Wednesday in Parliament, where we were talking about reducing emissions from transport. So I tabled an amendment to what was a Labour motion to say reducing aviation emissions must include cancelling a third runway at Heathrow. Sadly, we didn't have the opportunity to vote on it, but it did at least give me the opportunity to challenge the government, as did other MPs who are anti-Heathrow expansion, I should say. But clearly there are some who are pro. But I will continue, along with Sarah Olney, my neighbouring MP in Richmond Park, to press government on this issue, and we'll force a vote again whenever we can.
You see, we still have ringing in our ears Boris Johnson saying, "I will lay down in front of the bulldozer." Where is he on that one?
Remarkably quiet. I have said now twice in Parliament, you can find it on Hansard, parliamentary record, that I have cited his promise. And on Wednesday I did point out, now he's Prime Minister, he doesn't even have to keep his promise of lying down in front of the bulldozer. He can cancel it at the stroke of a pen. If we are serious about tackling the climate crisis, and this government says it is, then you cannot possibly back a third runway at Heathrow. It's already the biggest emitter of carbon in the country, and building a third runway will add another potentially up to 9 million tonnes of carbon emissions every year, and a further 300,000 flights.
It's difficult to imagine what a tonne of carbon emission would look like. And I've heard people saying, "Oh, it's so many times the size of the Shard every second," or something like that. So I think we need a sort of graphic,
yes, you're right,
representation of how damaging this all is.
Yes, you're right. And actually, maybe I should look into that. Interestingly, just later on today, I'm meeting with the Teddington Action Group, who are very active on opposing Heathrow expansion. And they've also been looking at some academic research that shows how far the particulates that are emitted through from planes, how far they travel downwind from Heathrow almost into central London, whereas until now Heathrow and apparently even the Department for Transport have claimed that those particulates pretty much stay within the boundary of the airport, and you and I are breathing all of those things in.
Well, I know that another part of your enormous brief is health and well-being.
Yeah.
And one thing that you're particularly concerned with, and I think this goes back to some of the jobs that you've had in the past, is the uptake of bowel screening for cancer. That it's not happening.
So I worked many years ago for a national charity called Beating Bowel Cancer, who happened to be based locally. First they were in St Margaret's and then they were in Teddington, and we did quite a lot on promoting screening then. And then I was at a cancer research drop-in event in Parliament this week, and they gave me some stats on the Twickenham constituency, and actually we're below the national average here for uptake of bowel screening, which is a concern. And clearly, bowel cancer is one of the three biggest cancer killers, and the quicker you pick it up, the more likely you are to have a positive outcome. So I was really concerned to hear that we've got low uptake of screening, and that's something I'm keen to try and promote further.
Was little Munira Wilson, did you always dream that you were going to be an MP?
I think thought first crossed my mind when I was studying A-level politics. It was slightly by accident that I ended up doing A-level politics. I was passionate and very good at languages at school, and I did French. I knew I wanted to do French and German for A-level. I thought I've got to find another subject, and some of the traditional ones I'd done at GCSE weren't that attractive. And at A-level, my school offered economics or politics, and I always had an interest in current affairs, so I took up politics and just realised I was fascinated by it. And when I learnt about what MPs do and visited Parliament, I thought, actually, that would be quite a cool job. But I can't say that was something that was driving me from the age of 16 or 17 onwards. I then went off and did other things, and then got very active and inspired and keen to maybe work towards elected office when I was maybe around 23, 24, it was around the time the Iraq War happened, and I was shouting quite a lot at the telly, and somebody turned around and said to me, "Why don't you actually stop shouting at the telly and go and do something about it?" So that's when my journey started, which was about 16 years ago, actually.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today, because you're very, very busy. And, we really do appreciate you popping in. And I hope that we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
And this is Valerie Munro returning you to the reading.